Welcome back. Now we're going to talk about types of nonverbal communication. And there's a whole bunch of different kinds, so let's just start off. The first one are kinesics. Kinesics is movement, or kinesthesiology is the study of movement. So kinesics is movement or body movement. So when you think about body movement, you start thinking about posture, how you stand, whether you stand upright and straight, and like the position of attention and all that, or whether you sit slumped over and that. So it's gestures, it's moving your hands, it's moving your head around, it's leaning in, leaning away. It's foot placement. The way your feet place are indicative of what you're looking at doing. So if my feet are pointing at the door while I'm sitting here talking to you, that implies that I would like to go to the door and leave. If I'm in a group of people and I'm really interested in talking to this person over here, even though I'm communicating with the people on this side of the room, my feet, which are now pointing this way, are probably going to point towards the person that I would prefer to talk to. So when you look at body movement, when you think about kinesics, you got to think about all the various elements that can actually have that effect. The next one is facial expressions, or face. Here's the deal with that. Obviously we know with the happy and the sad and all the various facial expressions we have. One of the things we have to think about is the idea of not just reading other people's facial expressions, but paying attention to our own. Because if we act really surprised about something and then say, no, that made perfect sense to me, it's not going to gather. The people aren't going to kind of grab that one. So facial expressions, of course, are the next one. And it's whether it's a smile or a frown or whatever. The next thing we're going to talk about is eye contact. And there's two different sets we're looking at. Eye contact when you are the speaker and eye contact when you are the listener. If you are speaking, if you are the one talking, you should be making eye contact 60 to 70% of the time. That means that when I'm looking, I'm not just looking at you, I'm looking around, I'm checking the room, but for the most part, more than half, 60 to 70% of the time, I'm making eye contact with that little circle on the iPad. I'm looking at your eyes. So, if that's the case, how much should you do when listening? 80 to 90%. Yes, it's a little more. Obviously, you shouldn't be like staring them down, just trying to like bore holes through their head. But you should be looking, generally speaking, 80 to 90% of the time. For the most part, you should be making eye contact. Now, in our society, we believe eye contact is very important. If you're not making eye contact, you're not paying attention. In other societies, like in Japan, constant eye contact or too much eye contact is actually a sign of disrespect or a challenge to authority. So you got to be careful about that. When I mediate, I have an issue with eye contact because I suffer from ADHD. That means that when I'm making eye contact with people, instead of me just making eye contact, looking away a little bit, but looking at them, I'll start looking at them, and then my eyes drift. I say, oh, look, that eyebrow is just a little bit lower than the other. And is that eye just a little bigger? Did they get their eyeshadow on wrong? Boy, that mouth curl is kind of funny. And I'm not hearing a word they're saying because I'm easily distracted because it's like squirrel. So I have to tell them when I'm mediating, I will tell people, I don't listen. I listen to you. I'm hearing you. I tend not to make as much eye contact because I'm easily distracted because of my ADHD. So I tend to look down at my paper. I am listening to you and I am making that contact. So when you think about it, when you're making eye contact with people, if you're not one to make so much eye contact, but you are paying attention, you may need to express that to them. The next thing we're looking at is voice. Right here, voice, paralanguage. It's the idea of tone of voice, pitch, tempo, volume. All of those things that change your rate of speaking. If you're talking really, really fast or if you're talking really, really slow. So these all change, whether you get a little more quiet or you get really loud. All of these things are paralanguage, and it impacts how we interpret what people are saying. Coming up after that, we have artifacts. Artifacts or appearances, how you look. For example, I'm here in a coat and tie. Sometimes I'm in a full suit, sometimes I'm just wearing a sport coat, sometimes I'm wearing shorts and Birkenstocks. We don't teach shorts and Birkenstocks, but that's a whole other argument. But how we choose, what we choose to do, whether we choose the kind of glasses we do, whether we have tattoos, wedding rings, all these things are artifacts, and all these things tell people certain things. Like, for example, you walk up to someone and they have got full tat sleeves to both sides, things written on their hands. They got neck tattoos coming up here. They've got big old gauges in their ears. They've got a chain running from their nose to their ear. All these things. You make an assessment and you change your communication style according to that. Problem is, you make that assessment and then they open their mouth and you realize they're sitting on 2 PhDs and they're a brilliant person, but that's not what you associated with it. So that's a stereotype you did, which isn't necessarily bad. It's bad when you don't change it when you find out differently. All right, so we moved on from that. We've got the artifacts. Let's talk about haptics. Haptics are touch. It's the idea of feeling. So when you go out, reach out and shake somebody's hand, that is haptics. If you do it really quick and walk away, it has an impact. If you have never tried to shake hands or you've never really thought about it much, you really should. Because if you walk up to someone and you're supposed to meet web to web and you just stick your hand out there and you don't squeeze or anything, it leaves a bad impression. The inverse of which, reaching out there and just crushing someone's hands, also leaves a bad impression. You should have meet hand to hand, match firm pressure between each other. You know, if you got sweaty palms, try to do a quick wipe off. You know, I mean, don't go like, you know, but you can catch your leg really quick on your way up and wipe off your palms if you know you're that kind of person. Hugs are another situation. And there's this whole thing going around Facebook and all that, talk about medicinal benefits of hugs. I can tell you that depending on the person you're hugging, prolonged hugs actually can provide a calming effect or a useful effect. But a lot of you people are probably anti-huggers, like, don't touch me, don't touch me. So think about that. Those are all haptics. How you touch, how you hug. Are you a over-the-top hugger? Are you an under the arms hugger? Are you a, you know, when you're doing handshakes, are you a two-hand grip handshake? Are you going to do the preacher's one where you grab the hand and you grab the forearm at the same time, or the upper arm at the same time? All right. The next one we're talking about is territory. Had to look, got them out of order because it had to fit on the board. We are territorial creatures. How we communicate based on our territory, and if we're outside of our comfort zone or we're outside of that territory. But a lot of you are probably still sitting in the same seats that you sat in when you first started class. So we are territorial, and when someone comes in and takes that seat, we get mad. We think this is our space, we're going to keep our space, and therefore it's ours. I've got environment listed on the board, and I'm going to talk about it very briefly here. Environment changes the attitude of what's going on. If you are looking in a average classroom, you've got a list of a whole bunch of columns and rows of chairs, all facing up front. So it's the idea of me lecturing to you. Whereas if we were to make a big circle of chairs, it becomes more of a discussion. It was the idea of the Knights of the Round Table, and nobody's greater than the other, we're all in one big round table. I will go more in depth of this when we get to mediation because it does have subtle impacts on the dynamics of the room. The second to last one we're going to talk about is chronemics. For those of you who don't know, Chronos, Chronos is a root word here for this, is the god of, or the titan of time. So chronemics has to do with time. Societies all have different ideas of time. Some people look at time as a very linear process of past, present, future. That's the United States. That's a lot of places we deal with. But there's also a lot of people that kind of blend those. And it's really not about the past and the future, and it's all about the now. And so everything kind of merges together. And we all have different takes on the importance of time. In the West, here in the United States, Canada, Great Britain, some of those places, we have a very linear view of time. And if we say, are we supposed to meet someone at 8 o'clock, we expect them to be there at 8 o'clock or a little before. Maybe a few minutes after, give time for the watch to be off or something. But generally speaking, we expect it to be that. Problem is, there are societies in this world that don't see time that way. Argentina is one of them, but my favorite one is Hawaii, because they've got a name for it. In Hawaii, it's called island time. So if you've got a meeting you've got a 10 o'clock business meeting in the morning, it may be 2 o'clock in the afternoon before you actually meet. Waves were up, dude, or life was happening. Time is not as important. So you have to be careful when interpreting that for people, because a lot of us get very upset when we expect to do something at a certain time and someone holds us up, they don't show up, they don't do it. You've got those chronic people that are chronically late. We take it as an insult a lot of times. So there's the issue with time. Now let's look at the last one, and that's proxemics. Proxemics is proximity or distance from someone. So when we look at this, there's 4 basic zones: intimate, personal, social, and public. Intimate zones are 0 to 18 inches. It's that person right up against you. It's intimate. It's being really close to that person you like. And you know it when someone interrupts you, like when the teacher comes in, it leans way in, and they're like right up against your ear, and it's like creeps you out. It's because it's intimate. It's that intimate zone. The next one is personal, which is 1.5 feet to 4 feet. It's from the intimate zone out to 4 feet. If environment allows, because this is environmentally specific, but if environment allows, we prefer to kind of have people at arm's length of each other. In fact, if we both stuck our arms out, we don't want it to be able to touch. That's that personal space. We like to have a little elbow room. You know, think about being on an elevator. When you walk on an elevator and you come into the elevator, yeah, you hit the button, the door closes, and most people kind of back over here to the back right corner or back left, but they step back to the corner. Somebody else comes in, they tend to come to the other side of the elevator. It really gets a little creepy when you're standing in the elevator and somebody comes in and stands right next to you. It's like the bro code at using the urinals. You don't use the urinal immediately next to another guy unless there's no other urinals available. So it's that personal space we like. The next one is social, which is 4 to 12 feet. And if you look at a group of people talking, it's usually out there in that range. You're not quite as close together. You're like, hey, how you doing? You're talking or whatever. Obviously, this is again impacted by environment. If you have too small of a space, you can't have that distance. And then public is 12 plus. And I'm going to use this room for an example. Right here, which you can't see, is a desk. This is as close to the people I can. Right here are people. I am about 4.5, 5 feet away from the chairs. This is a comfortable zone because my back is against the wall. People recognize it. But in this room, if I sat here and talked right here at the desk, it would really mess with people. It really kind of makes them feel weird. So those are the types of nonverbal, and let's go on to the next part.